side, I see the born of no return. It's just ahead now, it's just ahead now. Can't you see we're rushing for the end? I see the point of no return. Now see the point of no return. It's just ahead.
Well, good evening. It's Monday, November 25th, 2013. This is Thanksgiving week. And right after that is the dreaded Black Friday. Are you going to be standing in line to get $100 off on that big screen TV that you got no place to put? Well, I can tell you something. I won't be. I'll probably still be in a turkey coma. In any case, welcome. You're listening to Wide Awake News on the Rense Radio Network. My name is Gary Hendershot, and for the next hour, I'm going to be barking at the moon. And let's see here. I guess I should flip a coin to decide, what is really the hot item of the week. Let's see. Benghazi. Nah, that's last week. That is just, so October, How about the IRS scandal? I don't know. I think that was a September issue. Let's see. Obamacare. That's a hot topic on everybody's mind. I don't know. That's kind of last week's issue too, isn't it? I mean, they're coming at you so fast and so furious. Wait a minute, that's it. Fast and Furious. Yeah, how about that? Fast and Furious. No, wait a minute. I think that was like June or July. I mean, that's yesterday's news. That's, like Hillary Clinton would say, what does it matter now? I mean, that was last week, Why should anybody care, Who cares what happened last week? But it is humorous, in a way, that these issues seem to come and go so quickly with no resolution. Last week we had the 50th anniversary of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Now, why anybody would consider an assassination of a U.S. president to be something worthy of a celebration, I don't know. I have to stop and think about that for a minute. But, I must admit, it did get people, reviewing the case. And, we had the usual folks out there saying, oh, it was Lyndon Johnson. And no, it was the mafia. No, it was Castro. No, it was some lone nut named Lee Harvey Oswald. And frankly, that's about the most ridiculous conspiracy theory of the bunch, but that's the one that everybody seems to be focused on as the real deal. And, I made mention of it in my broadcast last Monday. It was that time of year, everybody was talking about it. So, I would have been remiss in my duties if I did not at least address it. But, I took a lot of heat because, I had this group over here saying, why didn't you come down on Lyndon Johnson? Because it was obviously a Lyndon Johnson deal. Oh, why didn't you come down on this one? Why didn't you come down on that one? Well, to be honest with you, because I don't know. Like most of you out there, I've heard all the theories, and frankly, I don't believe any of them. Or maybe I believe all of them. It's just really hard to say. This thing with E. Howard Hunt. Well, it's real convenient that on his deathbed, he gave his son enough material to publish a book so the boy could make a few bucks. I mean, he's been kind of hard, down on his luck. Times have been tough for him, so maybe that was Hunt's parting gift to his son. I don't know. The Lyndon Johnson mistress, who after 50 years just comes out of the woodwork and has all a tell-all story about how Lyndon. To be honest with you, guys like Hunt and guys like Johnson, they're treading water in blood already. Okay, I mean they're up to their eyeballs in it. So what would taking the heat for just one more? How would that harm them? If I was pushed into a corner and said I had to make a wild guess, I would probably say organized crime pulled the trigger. Probably used some imported talent. They probably brought some boys in from France, or maybe Italy, or maybe Sicily. Organized crime pulled the trigger, but they were the glove, okay? The CIA's hand was in that glove. That would be my best guess. Do I know for sure? No. And I tell you, most of the fellows out there trying to make a buck selling books on the topic, they don't know either. Just like me, they're taking their best guess. And I suspect that'll be how it is for the time being. I do think the one thing that we can all get behind is the idea that the story we were told by the national news media, our so-called Fourth Estate, and our government was absolute hooey. It was garbage. Much like 9/11, the official story is the most absurd conspiracy theory of them all. But like I say, what does it matter? JFK assassination, that's 50 years ago. Why does that make any difference to us today? Well, a lot of people would say that was the coup d'etat that brought into power those who are still in power. It's still on today's show. But in more up-to-date news, and I guess we should talk about some of the stuff that's been happening here recently. I mean, believe me, I would love to talk about Benghazi because there's a lot that really needs to be discussed about Benghazi. I would really like to hammer on this IRS scandal where the IRS was obviously used as a weapon to stifle dissent. You betcha. I mean, that is an important issue. Excuse me, I'm not sure what happened there. One of my my Skype connection to Rents seemed to have a little bit of a hiccup there. There are so many of these issues that have kind of been, waved under our nose until we get a little, sniff of the stench, and then immediately we're off onto some other issue of the day. But one thing that's happened here recently that is indeed kind of new and exciting. I mean, it's definitely different. I don't think we've seen anything quite like it before. At least I don't remember ever seeing anything like this in my lifetime. We have had, this is according to Breitbart, the article that I'm looking at here is from investors.com. Obama's military coup purges 197 officers in just 5 years. In just 5 years. Now, these are generals, admirals, colonels. These are the boys who make the decisions for the military. These are the boys who run the show for the military. And in just 5 years, for one reason or another, and many reasons have been given, everything from can't keep his pistol in his pocket to gambling with phony chips to the troops under his command were not at the highest of morale or whatever. I don't know. So many different reasons, but for the most part, stuff that you would think a general officer might get taken out to the woodshed for and given a quick kick in the keister and then sent back to work. Maybe lose one of his 4 stars or whatever. Not the type of stuff that you would expect a military leader to be dismissed over. Well, here's what one retired general had to say about it. A fellow named Major General Paul, and I'm probably going to mess up this poor guy's name, Vallely, Vallely. And he's apparently published some material on this topic. This is a little quote from him. Let's see here. Obama will not purge a civilian or political appointee because they have bought into Obama's ideology. Okay? The White House protects their own. That is why they stalled on the investigation into Fast and Furious, Benghazi, and Obamacare. He's intentionally weakening and gutting our military, Pentagon, and reducing us as a superpower. And anyone in the ranks who disagrees or speaks out is being purged. Interesting. Another senior retired general told the Blaze on condition of anonymity, because he still provides services to the government and fears possible retribution, that they're using the opportunity of the shrinkage of the military to get rid of people that don't agree with them or do not toe the party line. Remember, as Rahm Emanuel said, never waste a crisis. For President Obama, now this is the opinion of the writer of this article, for President Obama, the military of a once feared superpower is an anachronistic vestige of an America whose exceptionalism and world leadership require repeated apologies. It must be gutted and fundamentally transformed into a force-wearing, gender-neutral headgear only useful for holding the presidential umbrella when it rains. It is to be his military and is to be used for his purposes. It's kind of a lot of 50-cent words in that basically means Obama didn't like these fellas. Okay? These were cold warriors. These were fellas from the Soviet era, when the United States was shaking its nukes at Russia, and Russia was shaking its nukes at the United States. Well, now that things have calmed down a little bit, and we don't have this, Cold War going on, these old cold warriors need to be put out to pasture, and a kinder, gentler U.S. military needs to be put in place. And I suspect they're going to be issuing tutus and fairy dust to our soldiers instead of rifles and combat boots. Just don't know. But it appears that the new norm for the U.S. military is to not be feared by our enemies. And guys like what are getting kicked out had a little different attitude on things. They figured the best way to keep your enemy in check was to keep him scared. Interesting. So now the only one they want to keep in fear. Yeah, the American people. The American people should be in fear because nowadays, more and more, it's being turned inward to keep an eye on you. You know, we're worried about not so much about a Cold War with Russia anymore. Now we're worried about homegrown terrorists. Homegrown terrorists. Yeah, you know, if you try and sneak a six-pack of beer into the football game under your coat, you could be a terrorist. You know, yeah. I'm not sure what they're going to do about the people holding their iPhones up on the video screen when the movie's playing and then, you know, posting that on YouTube. I don't know what they're probably terrorists, but they'll probably have to wait until this new TPP thing gets enacted before they go after that particular group. Hard to tell. But in any case, 197 military officers basically cashiered in just 5 years. Most unusual. As far as I know, such a thing has never happened before in U.S. history. That is a significant changing of the guard. What does it mean? I hear a lot of guesses, but frankly, not sure anybody really knows for sure. Keep an eye on it, though. Some say it was all about a litmus test about will you shoot at Americans who refused to turn in their handguns. A lot of people are reporting that. I'm not really sure of that either. Haven't seen definitive evidence. Does Obama want to grab your guns? Yeah, you betcha. Might he want to fire a whole bunch of military officers who actually believe that you have a constitutional right to keep and bear arms? Maybe. I suspect it's as good an argument as many that have been put on the table. As with all these things, I'm sorry, but, you know, you're going to have to take a look at the evidence. You're going to have to consider it for yourself. And you're going to have to make up your own damn mind. I can't force feed you my opinion, because frankly, my opinion's no valid than anyone else's out there. Well, let's see. Have we kissed and made up with Iran now? What do you think? Has everybody been following this? You know, apparently we've struck a deal with Iran. Okay, they're going to, at the very least, slow down their uranium enrichment procedures in return for, you know, some loosening up of some of the restrictions we've put on trade with that nation over the last 20 some odd. Actually, I guess it started during Jimmy Carter's administration. Here again, it's real hard to figure out exactly what's going on here. If you're one of the Israel first crowd out there, if you think Israel can do no wrong and that their caca don't stink, you know, you're probably pretty mad at the Obama administration over this because, you know, it's obviously a slap in the face of Netanyahu over there in Tel Aviv. He's, you know, this is obviously not something that they're real happy about, and it kind of takes a little bit of credence away from those who say that that Israel basically owns the U.S. government and that, you know, it's the tail wagging the dog and that we just do whatever Israel says without even thinking about it. Because, you know, obviously making a deal with Iran on this issue was not something that Israel is going to be real happy with. So, you know, I'm not sure this deal with Iran is really going to make any constituency in the United States real happy. Here again, we're just going to have to wait and see. And bottom line is, as far as I can tell, the Iranians have done nothing in their nuclear program that is not sanctioned by international treaties that they're a member of. Yeah, they are entitled to build nuclear plants for peaceful uses, for making medical isotopes and to generate electricity. There's nothing illegal about that, but as we know, some nations, Israel, Japan, have indeed turned these nuclear power plants into weapons factories. So yeah, could they maybe divert some of their enriched uranium from their peaceful use into weapons? Yeah, sure. It can happen. That's why they've got this international nuclear regulatory outfit out there that's supposed to keep them in line. Well, in any case, I'm hearing music in the background, so it looks like I'm going to have to slip out of here for a little commercial interruption. Please do stand by. We'll be back right after these important commercial announcements. And we are back from that blatant commercial announcement. Hey, got to sell some product, keep the lights on at the network. Now, a couple of quick items to think about on this so-called kiss and make up between the U.S. and Iran. Israel and the Saudis are not real happy about this deal. It's been Israel and the Saudis that have been kind of pushing and pushing and pushing on the U.S. To do something about Iran. Now that the United States has kind of stepped back from the edge a little bit, hoping to let things maybe cool off, there is noise coming out of Saudi Arabia and Israel that they may just take it upon themselves to do something. Many of the generals that have been released from service by Obama recently were of the Israel First crowd. Okay? Now, you can take that for what it's worth, but many of these fellows honestly believed that, the interests of Israel were so closely tied with the interests of the United States that the Israelis could do no wrong. Okay? A lot of those type have now been purged from the military. And I suspect the ones that are left are probably in fear for their pension. So, one positive note maybe about dropping all these higher-ups in the military is that Obama now has the wiggle room to make a deal with Iran that is not necessarily tied to the best interests of the State of Israel. Maybe that's one of the reasons behind all the firings of so many top generals and admirals. Just something to think about. The other thing to keep in the back of your mind is that, the end game for the big boys has always been some kind of a face-off between the U.S., Russia, and China. I mean, frankly, that is the end game that the puppeteers are trying to get all these politicians fixated on. Just recently, things have started to heat up a little bit in what we refer to as the Sea of Japan. Some islands that have been in dispute between China, South Korea, and Japan for many, many years, are all of a sudden, on the table being jockeyed around. Maybe, just maybe, the end game is a little quicker than what we were thinking. We were always thinking, well, gee, they got to do this thing with Syria. They got to take Syria to do Iran, and they got to do Iran to have the back door into Russia, and they got to have the, and you figure they're moving all these, pieces around like chessmen on a chessboard. And you figured we had some breathing room yet because they couldn't really do their end game until we had all these pieces of the puzzle put in place. Maybe they might just be skipping all the foreplay and getting right to the act. I would certainly hope not. But what do I know? I'm just an old country boy with a head full of straw barking at the moon. Once again, I'm afraid you're going to have to consider all the arguments and make up your own damn mind. Money. The root to all evil. Is money really evil in and of itself? Yeah, I don't think so. And as much as you might profess to be independent and, sovereign this and, poo-poo on, commercialism and all that, having a couple bucks in your pocket does give one a, certain feeling of security, whether it's, toilet paper with pictures of dead white guys on it or the jingle of coin. It just makes you feel a little better when you got a little bit of it in your pocket. Well, over the last 10, 15, 20 years, the value of the money that Americans use has without doubt gone down. A lot of the effects of inflation have kind of been hidden. Because see, back in the old days, when I was a youngster, when they did the consumer price index, they did a monthly survey of what it cost to buy a steak and some potatoes and a gallon of milk and a loaf of bread. The staples that everybody ate. They looked at energy prices, what you had to pay for a gallon of gasoline, what you had to pay for an automobile, and they put all these numbers together and they came out with a consumer price index that kind of gave you an idea of how much real inflation was. And this was an important calculation because a lot of people, if they worked at a job where they had a union or if they were a federal employee or perhaps on Social Security or something like that, they would get an annual adjustment in their compensation based on what was called a COLA, a cost of living allowance. You check the inflation rate and you say, okay, well, the inflation went up, 2% in the past year, so we got to give all the Social Security recipients, all the auto workers, all the federal employees, we got to give them a 2% raise to accommodate the increase in the cost of goods. Well, in recent years, the calculations on the inflation rate have kind of been, what folks in my generation would refer to as Mickey Moused. They've been, they've been juggling the books. Okay, instead of a steak, they're assuming nowadays you're going to eat a soy burger. Instead of, good tasty Idaho potatoes you're going to buy, instant or whatever, or, maybe you're going to buy rice. So the numbers have been Mickey Moused. And we don't really get an honest indication of the cost of living increases. I'm going to run into a break here in about 30 seconds. I'm going to try to finish this thought. But in a lot of products, particularly consumer goods like TVs and washers and dryers and the kind of stuff, that people buy on a regular basis, the cost of those goods has been artificially held down because it's no longer being manufactured here in the United States. It's being manufactured overseas using what we would consider slave wage labor. Okay, so nowadays that color TV that used to be made by a guy in Akron or a guy in someplace up in New York, it's being made by some mama-san in Taiwan or Korea or Malaysia that's probably making pennies compared to what an American worker would make. Consequently, the cost of these goods to you has been kept down artificially. So it's really very difficult for most people to figure out what the real inflation rate is until they go out and try and buy something like an automobile. When I was a young fella, you could buy a heck of a nice Mustang for about $3,500. I think if you want a Mustang nowadays, the low-end model is about $35,000. So yeah, if you think inflation has not been a factor over the years, guess again. Well, this was all fine and dandy. You were insulated from most of the effects of inflation, as long as all you're buying was a color TV or a washer or a dryer or something like that. But we'll get into the rest of this argument as soon as we get back from this commercial break, which came in about a minute late from my point of view, but I'm sure Brett's clock is more accurate than mine. Be back right after these commercial announcements. Please stand by. Just before we left for the break, I was trying to formulate an argument about inflation. And the argument I was trying to put on the table was much of the impact that you should have felt over the last 20 years or so as manufacturing jobs have migrated from the United States to other nations around the world. A television that in 1960 probably cost you about $300-400. In the year 2013, you can probably buy a nicer one, flat panel, for $300-400. So you think about, well, gee, television hadn't gone up a bit since 1966. Well, the stuff you do see rising in price very quickly, stuff like energy. What few products are indeed manufactured here in the United States, where it's much more difficult to hide the impact of inflation. Those things, you get a pretty good idea pretty quickly about the real impact of inflation over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. One of the big contributors to our insulation from the effects of inflation has been our relationship with the nation of China. Nixon, I guess, gets credit for finally thawing out the iceberg that had grown up between the United States and China. Bill Clinton probably gets credit for making them a nuclear power. But, I think it's probably General Motors that should get credit for making them a manufacturing powerhouse. I mean, I understand that the Buick is the biggest selling automobile in China now. And wouldn't surprise me a bit if the automobiles sold in the United States under the Buick and potentially even the Cadillac brand names may at some point in the near future be made in China. But see, there's a problem just over the horizon. The Chinese are now awash in dollars. They got dollars coming out of their ears because the balance of trade with China has just been ridiculous. Okay, they buy nothing from us, and we buy tremendous volumes of manufactured goods from them. So they got more dollars than they know what to do with. I mean, quite frankly, here pretty soon, they're just going to put them on rolls and put them in the public washrooms. I mean, what else are they going to do with them? All right? So China is now stepping back, and they're saying, you know, we got enough pictures of dead white guys. We got them everywhere. We got warehouses full of this stuff, and nobody wants them. And as it turns out, you know, there are nations of the world that are willing to trade with us using our currency, called the yuan. So this may portend difficulties in the near future for the United States, as China is no longer going to act as a buffer against the effects of inflation. Gee, are there any other suckers out there that Malaysia, maybe Indonesia? Frankly, even those boys are starting to wise up a little bit. They're starting to think, you know, I think we'd like to have yuan instead. So, you know, for years and years and years, America has benefited from the dollar being the so-called international trade currency. If Malaysia wants to buy something from China, they got to take their local currency, convert it into dollars, and then take the dollars to China to get whatever manufactured goods they want. That's how things have gone. Well, now China's kind of looking at Malaysia and saying, tell you what, you know, we'll let you buy stuff with your currency if we can buy some of your stuff with ours. Does that sound like a deal? And they're shaking hands out there saying, yeah, well, they're cutting Uncle Sam out of his piece of the vigorish, okay? His piece of the action. Now, one thing Guido, the government doesn't like much when you cut him out of a piece of the action is, you know, that's a serious thing, you know. Guido, the government is accustomed to getting its cut, you know. Just want to wet their nose a little bit, you know. And with nations now moving in the direction away from the dollar, that means that the United States no longer gets a little taste of every transaction that goes down in the world. That, to the money men, is a serious problem. It's a problem worth going to war for. And now we're starting to rattle our sabers against the Chinese, telling them, if you get into it with Japan over these islands over here, if you get into it with the Philippines over these fishing rights, you know, you may just have to face off with us. So maybe, just maybe, our stepping away from a conflict in Syria, or stepping away from a conflict with Iran, maybe, just maybe, it's more about moving the game up a notch. Maybe. Do I have any inside information? No. I've got access to the same material that you have. I read it, I consider it, make up my mind. And frankly, that's something we all need to get in the habit of doing. I got news for you. Just because some guy stands out on the corner with a bullhorn and makes a lot of noise doesn't necessarily mean he knows any more than you do. He's just a lot louder. I try to be a little bit more thoughtful. Can't really give you all the answers. Best I can do. Put the arguments on the table. Try to make the arguments understandable. And ask you to please, make up your own damn minds. So what are the solutions? You talk about all these problems. What are the solutions? What are the solutions? Do you know that within my lifetime, the people of the United States brought down an administration? Did it really change anything? No. I mean, we basically embarrassed Richard Nixon out of the office. Nowadays, I'm not sure that strategy would work. I don't know. I think if we got the million people marching around the White House saying, "Get the hell out of my house," I'm not sure this current bunch would get the message. They'd hop on Air Force One and, fly off to Bermuda and wait us out until we got tired. That seems to be the game that they play. Back in those days, when you had 1 million Americans gather together and say, "Hey, we are the people, and this is how it's going to be," there was a pretty good chance that the government would actually listen and at least back off for the time being, and until you all settled down. Then they go right back to what they were doing. Did you know that 2 million people, 2 million, not one, 2 million people marched on D.C. against Obamacare long before the bill was even introduced? And you know what you heard about on the mainstream media, that dinosaur media that's losing viewers right and left, and they can't figure out why? You know what you heard on the news media? Crickets. Or, what's the latest, info babe got to say? Or, who's sleeping with who in Hollywood? That's what you heard on the news. You didn't hear that 2 million people marched on D.C. against Obamacare. So is there a way to effect change peacefully in today's United States of America? That's a tough one. Wish I knew. I really don't know. I do know that we've got to try, because the alternatives are not really something I want to think about. It can't go on the way it is right now, that's for sure. There came a point in the late 1960s, early 70s, when enough of us got up in their face and said, this war in Southeast Asia cannot continue. It took us a while. Eventually they listened. Right now, I'm not sure they're even willing to listen to us. It may require force, something none of us really wants to consider. Well, that's it for me. I've spent my hour barking at the moon. Get out there and take a look at some of these issues, and you make up your own damn mind. We'll see you next week. Good night, all.
What will you say? calling out to you. Won't you turn, 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 turn around? Oh, I'm calling out to you. Won't you turn, turn, won't you turn around?